West Kentucky Community and Technical College is so happy to have you here. Many of you I know are students, some of you may be faculty and staff, and we may just have some community partners here as well. Our whole goal today is to talk about what a wonderful, caring community we live in Western Kentucky, and to kind of highlight with the panelists some of the resources available to people who may be struggling with mental health concerns or maybe have been through hard things and need extra support. So I want to kick us off by introducing our panelists. Right next to me here is Kirsty Singer, and next to her is Dr. Mary Foley, and then we have Kelly and Olivia Lanier, and I'm going to let them first talk to you a little bit about their educational backgrounds. I know we have some future therapists and social workers in the room, and it's interesting to hear the different backgrounds, the different educational degrees that we can pursue in order to end up as a mental health professional. So I'll start. I'm Jamie Wells. My degree is in intermodal expressive arts therapy. So my training taught me how to use art, music, writing, and movement in therapy. So I currently am an instructor here in psychology and abnormal psychology.
Very cool. As she said, I'm Kirsty Singer. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and so I have an undergrad in elementary and special education, but then led me to a master's in psychology with a specialization in applied behavior analysis, where we use the science of human behavior to teach new skills or improve behaviors.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Mary Foley. I got an odd start. My background is actually in journalism, and then I ended up with a business degree and then changed my mind and went to Murray State, and my master's is in clinical psychology. Went on to Western Kentucky University for a doctorate in clinical psychology. And so I've spent most of my career working with victims of interpersonal crime, child sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence. Spent some time as a forensic interviewer for law enforcement for child sexual abuse victims, and now work for Merriman House. So I work with victims of trauma, so post-traumatic stress disorder and treatments to help folks cope with that terrible experience.
I'm Kelly. I am the director of Mountain Comprehensive. We have 2 mental health clinics close here, one in Paducah and one in Benton. We also have a dual diagnosis women's residential facility. It's for substance abuse and mental health, so we can work with them on the trauma that led to substance abuse. So my past history, I worked for 17 years in foster care. So getting a start there, working with little people and their trauma and adjusting to the new experiences and the changes going on in their lives. And then switched over to Mountain Comprehensive, where I get to see from little people to adults and work in different arrays of what they've experienced. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so that means that I can see any demographic as far as Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, which really allows me to see anyone and not have barriers on that. There's such a need, and there is such a stigma when it comes to mental health. I'm a therapist with a therapist, and I'm totally fine saying that, because sometimes we just need someone that is a safe, open space that we can say, this is what I'm feeling and this is what's going on in my life, but I don't want to talk to my family or my husband about it. I want it to be separate. So I encourage anyone who just feels like they need someone safe to talk to, find a therapist. And not every therapist is a fit. So find one that you can trust, find one that you feel comfortable and safe with, and if you find yourself keeping things from that person, they're not the right fit.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Olivia Lanier. I'm a therapist at Lotus. This is actually my old stomping grounds. I graduated from here with an associate's degree, then went on to Bethel University in McKenzie, Tennessee, got my bachelor's in psychology, and then did my master's degree in social work through the University of Louisville. I'm a certified social worker, working towards that L that Kelly over here is talking about, being able to get more broad clients and reduce those barriers. I'm with Lotus, which is our region's Sexual Violence Resource Center and Child Advocacy Center. We work a lot with trauma and victims and survivors of lots of types of abuse, sexual violence, things of that sort.
Thank you so much. I want to spend a little time talking about different approaches to therapy because I know we all use probably slightly different techniques. If you would just tell us a little bit about the typical clients that you work with and what approaches the therapists at your agency use.
Great. So at Bloom, we use what's called applied behavior analysis. And so our clientele are primarily individuals diagnosed with autism, ages 2 to 14 mostly, but we also have some adult clients who receive our services. And so our therapy really just focuses on changing the environment to support their needs. So teaching new skills, often communication or independent living skills, but also helping them to cope with really hard things and choose better alternatives.
Thank you.
I primarily work, like I said, with trauma survivors. So that might look like a lot of work around post-traumatic stress disorder or just post-traumatic stress, anxiety disorders, depression, maybe subsequent things that come out of trying to cope with a trauma background, maybe an eating disorder, struggling with some substance use. I am not a substance use practitioner. I refer all those folks over here to Kelly. In terms of approach, I am a very strong believer in evidence-based approach. So there's a lot of smart people out doing a lot of good research to inform the practitioner side of what we do. And so I am trained in EMDR. So if you don't know what that is, I would encourage you to read about it. It's a very powerful tool. It's not for everyone, but it is for many people. Probably what I like to do first is some of that attachment work. You know, sometimes when we go through a traumatic event, many times it's at the hands of somebody that we know and trust. And so that betrayal trauma is significant, whether that's a parent or a family member, member of the clergy, a teacher, a neighbor, a cousin. So a lot of the work that I start with is really just trust and rapport, giving people language for emotions that maybe they don't feel like they have the words to express. So sometimes that's because it doesn't seem to express the pain that they feel, or they don't have language for what it is that they've experienced. But also many times what we are learning through those great researchers is that trauma affects aspects and parts of our brain. Absolutely. And so what I love about the work that I get the privilege of doing is we're able to educate folks that you're not just being difficult or there's not anything wrong with you. What we know is that trauma really does impact the brain, the neural pathways, the networks, all of those pieces, actual structures of the brain we know are affected by trauma. So sometimes those words aren't there because that aspect and part of our brain is offline when something traumatic happens. And so it's helping folks to reconnect with that experience and cope and manage that in an effective way. And to also realize that they're so much more than the experience that they went through, and that what they're experiencing is treatable. So if that's sleep problems or anxiety or panic or forgetfulness, just their emotions seem to be completely turned off, or maybe they're turned way, way too high on. So it's helping folks to regulate and to integrate the experience that they've been through. So I guess in short, it would be attachment, evidence-based trauma treatments, and some good old-fashioned cognitive behavioral therapy for those of you that know what that is.
Well, and we're going to talk about that because I have a little thing I like to do on that. But as Dr. Mary was saying, trauma literally rewires your brain. So we have to, within therapy, the therapists are working with you to try to figure out where that trauma came from and go back to that, where we can start working on ways to work through it. Trauma doesn't just go away. So if we do not explore it, if we do not talk about it and work through the emotions that are tied to it, she was talking about trauma bonds, you going back to those situations because it's what you know, or it created a feeling for you that meets some type of need. So we work with you all on that. I'm a trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapist, as is Dawn Luxmore here in the front row. She's one of my therapists. We work with, people that have experienced trauma, but one of my favorite things for us to think of to just break it down is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is like a triangle. Okay, so what we think affects how we feel. How we feel affects how we behave. So it comes down to everything in our life. We have to be mindful of how we think about it, because it's going to determine everything else with how we react to it, how we feel about it. So if we can kind of reprogram that too, it is, you know, if you're driving down the road and a song comes on that you don't like, do you just listen to it? No, we change the station, right? So you're going to have to reprogram your brain to change that station. Instead of beating yourself up, I failed at this, I can't do this, this is always going to be this way. No, I can do hard things. Today is just a hard day, tomorrow's going to be better. I'm capable of handling things that come my way and not giving up. So we work with you guys on those things that will help push you to that growth and that opening of, I'm capable of this. And what she said, my trauma doesn't define me. Those experiences that I had doesn't define me. The rest of my life, I get to make choices that I feel good about and that can help make my story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us on this stage right now are trauma focused, so I feel like I'm repeating a lot of what has been said already. But I think the stereotype of therapy is someone sitting on a couch and you're telling them how you feel about it, and that's not the case at all. Talk therapy is excellent. There's so many ways we can integrate other things, expressive things, nature, mindfulness into therapy, into helping rewire those brains and those trauma bonds. I'm personally trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and EMDR as well. And we at our sanctuary, we like to call it, have like an expressive arts center, a holistic healing center. We can do yoga, mindfulness. We have a labyrinth we can walk on. So it's not just sitting in an office on a couch complaining or saying how we feel at all. There's lots of things we can do to integrate our bodies into that healing as well.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. So before I went to school to be a therapist, when I first went to therapy, I thought, this is going to fix me. I thought, it's only going to take a couple sessions and I'll be good. I feel like it's important for us to set up a realistic expectation. So if you're comfortable, talk about what is realistic. When are people likely to start feeling better? And is it true that sometimes at first it gets a little worse?
Yes. It's work. I tell people, don't come to therapy and think we're going to fix you. Number one, we can help provide the tools, but we can't make you use them. We're not with you in your day in and day out life. But it's work. Expect it to be hard. Expect it to not feel good and for you to have to work through those ugly emotions. When we first start seeing you, we're building rapport. We just want to get to know you. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What can we connect on that we build trust, and both ways, so that you respect and trust me, I respect and trust you. And then we think, after we've got some rapport built, how can we start working through the hard things that you've experienced?
I'll speak to my field of expertise, which is autism treatment and using applied behavior analysis. Oftentimes, the clients that we're serving are very young and have significant needs. And so we have some clients that come in and they make tremendous progress in a very short amount of time, and we're able to graduate them back into typical public school systems, right? Or we support the family, but the child is able to go back into school or daycare or whatever that is. We have some clients that we've seen for 10 years, and that may continue because their needs are so great, and they continue to make progress. But as we all know, as we get older, new challenges arise, right? Puberty is a big one that creates new challenges. Even going into adulthood, right? Whenever the family is looking for them to gain independence for potential living situations, right? Living on their own or holding employment. There's a lot of new skills that bubble up to the surface that, we need this. We need to keep working on skills. So, sometimes we see really quick progress on the things that are important to them and they're able to go back in. But other times we spend a good chunk of our time with these families and we become an extension of them, and we're happy to support them as long as they need us.
I think I would agree with most of the sentiments of or what are being shared. I think I would say, though, that you should see some significant improvement in the first 4 to 6 sessions, maybe 6 to 8 sessions, just in terms of the level of hopefulness, and relief that you feel. I am not a therapist that keeps people in therapy for years and years and years. I think if you're working with a treatment plan and you're working through, you should see some reason, right, to end that relationship. Doesn't mean people don't come back. Life has a way of allowing us to look at one thing from one angle, and then we have another, milestone. Maybe we get married, maybe we have children, maybe we go away to college, maybe there's a death in the family, and all of a sudden things come back up. And it's not that we didn't make progress or that things weren't healed, it's now we're looking at it from another angle, but all those skills and tools that we developed the first time are going to be with us the next time. I think the research would say most of the success should happen somewhere around session 23, 26. So why am I saying that? Everybody is uniquely different. And people don't always come right in a row or get all the things done they need to. But my take-home point is you should be seeing some relief early on. You should be seeing some significant improvements midway. And if you're not, you might not be with the right person. They may not be the right fit for you. And then I say all of that, and I will tell you probably the average length of time it takes somebody to complete what I would call intense trauma work can be anywhere between 9 months to a year. So it takes a bit of time. But I wouldn't want to discourage anybody. I think one of the biggest things I hear, I don't know about these other ladies, is, oh my gosh, if I open this up, I'm never going to be able to get all this back together, and I'm not even going to just do this work. And I think I would just say that that's really not the right way that I would conceptualize that. You're going to pace with your therapist at a pace that's tolerable. And I also really want to add, trauma work for me doesn't mean we have to go back up and dig things up. You don't talk about it just to talk about it. You don't process it just to process it. Trauma is when the past becomes present. And so we're only going to be working with issues that are there that are obviously telling us that we need to work with that. So I would want to dispel, and I don't do, and for me, y'all aren't going to get anything else but trauma work, because that's all I do, that's all I have done, so I'm not good for anything else. But but I think I would say there are many people for whom we do not do deep trauma work. We know what happened, they know how it impacted them, and then we work forward. Others, they know this, and then they realize there's tentacles everywhere that have impacted and shaped their life in ways that they are, coming to understand. And then for some, they've got that developmental, chronic, right, complex trauma that has just been from childhood on. Obviously, there's deeper work to do. So I just like to tell people, it doesn't mean we're going to crack open and digest what's ever happened to you in your whole life. Like that's not what we're going to do. And so it's definitely worth doing if you need to do it.
I want to pick up on a theme that you all have been talking about, and that is finding a good fit therapist. Mm-hmm. So does anyone have tips if somebody maybe has been considering wanting to start therapy? Where do you start in finding somebody that will be a good fit for you?
I think it really is, like everything else, number one, who takes your insurance? Or if you don't have insurance, do you do self-pay? Because with everything, you have to find someone that's a provider. There are resources out there that, will provide it through a grant or something like that. Word of mouth, maybe, I posted between a community that I respect and said, hey guys, is there anybody you all would recommend that you feel like would be a good therapist? As a therapist, I wanted someone that, had a good reputation for confidentiality, who didn't necessarily know everybody in Paducah, because I'm from Paducah, and so a lot of people know me. So I wanted someone that I felt my stuff was safe with. So I think, some of it is word of mouth, some of it is coming to events like this, so what your options are. You've got Mountain Comprehensive, you've got Four Rivers, you've got Emerald, you've got Lotus. It really depends on the type of therapy that you're looking for, what you want to focus on, and what's going on currently in your life. There are some resources that have everyone listed, whether it's in McCracken County or Marshall County, so by your county, that you could look up and find mental health providers.
I want to put a quick plug in, since some of you are West Kentucky students. We have an amazing resource, Wave Mallory. This is Mallory Thompson. She is your counselor if you would like to use her services. She's free for students at WKCTC.
Wonderful.
And she has been working here. Is this year 2? Year 3?
Going on, I guess, coming up on 2.
Yes. So, and she's loving it. She enjoys working with the student population. Students enjoy working with her. So, quick plug for Mallory.
I'd like to speak to finding the right provider for autism services or neurodivergent services. Oftentimes what we do at Bloom is that we invite families to come to our facility and meet with us first before making any final decisions. We recognize that there is a distinction for high quality providers of applied behavior analysis, and we want them to see what therapy looks like in our space with our clients before they make any commitments. And of course, we do evaluations to determine if they're a good fit for us, because we recognize that our therapy may not be what that individual absolutely needs. And oftentimes I refer out for cognitive behavioral therapy, because some people that come to our services, they're looking for something that's more their thought process, right? And we focus more on outward environmental behavioral things. So we absolutely want to make sure that we're a good fit first.
I think it's, you go.
Okay, sorry. I think too, it's okay to know that you might not be a good fit with that therapist and to get a new one.
Yes. You're not going to hurt your therapist's
You're not
feelings.
going to hurt any of our
Probably
our
thinking it
feelings.
too. about-
Because your therapist probably also feels that it's not the most beneficial relationship. You'll probably know within the first 4 or 5 sessions if you're building that rapport and that trust, and that is a good relationship to be able to open up and process those things with. And if it's not, there's 1,000 other options. It's not a personal thing at all. You're not going to walk up to a random person and hope that they're going to be your best friend, right? You're not going to walk up to a random therapist and hope they're going to be the person that understands you the most and works with you the best as well. So it is okay if you start with a therapist to realize, hey, this isn't really the best fit for me, and don't have to be a people pleaser, which I feel like we all kind of are, right? That's second nature for everyone. And say, hey, this isn't really working out. Let me find someone else. Or do you have recommendations for someone else?
I think it's important too, just to start with basics. Gender is an important aspect for some people, right? Race and ethnicity is an important aspect for some people. Age is an important aspect. Faith orientation is an important aspect. So I think just those things that maybe sometimes we don't just really give ourselves permission to think, who am I going to be most comfortable opening up to? And, I'm kind of known for some sass. I would say if they're weird, don't go there, right? Like, somebody's weird in a little bit. You're like, that's weird. And so if it feels weird to you, then it's going to feel weird to you the rest of the time. So just, move along. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one that feels that way, but sometimes people in our field are weird, and they just are. And so if you feel that, then that's probably true, and find somebody that's not as weird as the person you saw before. So I also think it's important to go to a reputable discipline, like social work, psychology, professional counseling, applied behavior analysis. Those are things that that have something behind them, a licensing board behind them, a code of ethics behind them. And that's really important. So you want somebody that's ethical, somebody that's well-trained, and somebody that's not weird.
So tomorrow on campus is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Walk, Out of the Darkness Walk. And so in honor of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about suicide prevention. So obviously this is a responsibility of all of us to help with suicide prevention. So what would you like to add to the conversation about what we can do as just a regular person caring about our friends and family to help with preventing suicide?
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing is talk to them. Never be afraid to ask questions, to see how they're feeling. the big stigma or the big thing that's said is, if you talk about it, then they'll give them ideas of doing it. It's the opposite. The more you talk to someone and you normalize feelings that they have, normalize thoughts that they have, the more apt they are to find support or find the outlets, saying, hey guys, here's a suicide prevention number, or this is how I'm feeling. I think it's normal, at some point in our lives we've thought, I don't want to do this anymore, or like this pain is too great, right? So being able to say, you're right, it is. It feels bad, it doesn't feel good. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about these thoughts and feelings you're having, and if they get further than just thoughts, fleeting thoughts, and we get into plan and intent, someone says, you know what, I think I'm going to go home and I'm going to do this with this. That's plan and intent. And we are all mandated reporters in the state of Kentucky. It doesn't matter if you're a licensed person, if you're a friend, if you're a mother. If someone tells you they're going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, you are mandated to help get them help, right?
I'm wondering, does that look different in a neurodivergent person? Would you talk a little about that?
Well, I'm fortunate that we've not experienced that with our clientele. And again, we have been a small business growing, so it's not to say that it won't be something in the future. And I imagine that we would reach out to those who are experienced and knowledgeable to give us guidance on that. But absolutely mandated reporting. If we ever have fear for someone hurting themselves or being hurt by others, we always report. And I do think, I'll speak personally, right? This is not from my professional standpoint, but in our company, we often say, just be a good person to others. Just be kind to others. And I think that can go a long way. It seems very cliche, but it can look like empathy and it can look like compassion, and those things make a difference for others.
Yes, if you see someone who's quiet, who's sitting alone, who looks sad, just to say, hey, how are you? Or, have a good day, or whatever it is. I think that, if you've got a friend who, hey, do you want this? I'm giving this away, or I'm starting to get rid of my belongings, or I'm writing letters about how much my friends and family mean to me. Those are big red flags that we need to go deeper with that person. Hey, what's going on with you? Won't you need that later? Talking to them about the future. What are you going to do next week? What are you going to do in a month? Because if they don't have future plans, that's also a red flag. But I love that. Show kindness. I was walking through the Orthopedic Institute yesterday. My 11-year-old broke her arm because she thought she could jump from the trampoline and hit the grass at dark. Yeah. And then she's like, Mom. But just walking through the Orthopedic Institute yesterday, and there's an elderly lady sitting there. No one's sitting with her, and her blouse is slightly open, right? I'm walking out with my 11-year-old. I could have just kept walking to my car. And my mind said, nope. So I went back and I said, ma'am, can I adjust your shirt? And she, And I'm like, you're kind of showing, can I adjust your shirt? And so, thank you. And I adjusted it. And it's just those small things, guys, those small moments of kindness that we're all capable of. Make eye contact, just a smile. Anything that shows you're a human, I care about you, I see you, you're valued.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about confidentiality and the limits of confidentiality so people understand. Yes, your therapist is going to take your story and sacredly hold it safe, but there are times when we have to let people know to keep you safe.
Well, I think confidentiality is something that, is really, really important. And I don't know, when you say talk about it, what, do you mean expound on it, clarify it, explain it?
Well,
do y'all see how I answer without even knowing apparently what the question was?
So I think what I mostly want to get at is like the limits of confidentiality within therapy, because yes, part of our job as a therapist is to hold your story sacred and not obviously share that with other people except when that's necessary. So when does it become necessary to break confidentiality?
Yeah, so one of the most, I guess, strongest predictors of how somebody's going to do in therapy is the therapeutic relationship they have with the therapist, right? That's really important. And part of that comes with that expectation that you're going to hold, I love that, hold what I tell you and you're going to carry that with you. So I think confidentiality, when we break confidentiality, it really should be a very serious thing because it is so sacred to hold that story or that information. We would do that if somebody has reported abuse of some kind of a vulnerable adult or a child threatens harm to self or others. It's actually written, we have to do it if they threaten the life of the president. So, things like that, just in terms of that safety, that safety threshold. Then I think there are times when we have to struggle with the ethics behind confidentiality. So if we're working with a teenager and they say something, and what's the agreement we have with the parent, and when would we disclose that or that concern? So sometimes the risk isn't imminent, but it could become imminent. So substance use that maybe the parent doesn't know about, an eating disorder that maybe they haven't discovered, some sort of self-destructive behavior like cutting that's gotten out of hand. So things like that, right, get kind of tricky in terms of when we break it, how we break it, what's the agreement ahead of time. But there are some very clear lines, and that really comes to that abuse, neglect, suicide, intent to harm somebody else. And so really that duty to warn, so we have a duty and a responsibility in the clinical relationship that if I say I am going to go harm this individual, and I tell my therapist that, my therapist has an obligation to then notify and let that individual know that they are they're under threat. Dane, did I get all that right? Okay.
That's funny.
Dane is also a mental health professional, and I'm looking back, I'm like, he's shaking his head. I think I'm on the right track. So, okay, good.
Yes, my emotional support person.
I think it's also important to be open and honest with your clients the very first session, very first time you meet, what those limits of confidentiality are. I always tell my clients, your safety is my number one priority. The holding your space and being your story keeper comes second to your safety. And there are multiple times that we will hold things safe and we will not tell anyone, but if your safety is at risk, that comes first and people will need to be notified.
And I would say in my field, we have oftentimes collaboration with other therapists or other care providers, so like teachers, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, who also support our clients. And so we always have explicit permission in a release of information document to make sure that they feel comfortable with us speaking about their therapy that they're receiving from us or their other providers speaking to us about what they do there. But we believe that honestly leads to greater progress because all the minds and areas are coming together to help that individual.
That helps lead into another thing that I wanted to talk about, stacking services. So normally when you have a therapist, you just work with that person one-on-one, but sometimes you need other services. So you may decide you want to participate in a group. We have some great opportunities for groups. There are grief groups. There is a chronic health support group in our community. You all probably have groups, I'm guessing.
There are support groups for families with autism.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Families on the spectrum in Paducah is wonderful.
Yes. So I also wanted to address that as far as the particular agencies you work for. What types of group services are available or services that, like for example, I know Lotus has yoga that may take a different form than the one-on-one therapy.
Well, I'll just speak on Mountain Comprehensive. So as far as we have different programs, we don't do yoga, which I think is awesome. But we have an APRN that does medication management. So they will do an evaluation to see if, along with your therapy, if medication can help. Not every antidepressant is going to help or fit your need. We've got case management. So we have a case manager that will help families, whether it is you're struggling to pay your electric bill, you're struggling to provide enough food, for your child, getting different resources and services within the communities. And then we also have school-based programs. So we've got a mental health associate in every school, basically, that also provides counseling to kids. So if you have siblings or children that have that need, that maybe they just need an outlet, someone safe that they can talk to, we've got those services as well. And then when there's additional things that could be more holistic, like yoga or whatever art, I love expressive art therapy and things like that, we will help find those resources to work together with.
Yeah, Lotus does offer like a yoga class once a week. We also have some expressive arts. We contract with someone that comes in and does different art programs and workshops with us. We also have advocates, so you can use an advocate without a therapist. You can use a therapist without an advocate. You don't have to have it all. You can pick and choose what you need. And advocates can help with just like transportation to things.
Yes.
We have a legal advocate because lots of our clients that are survivors are in the court system, do have open cases, and we have someone that's able to help walk them through meeting with the prosecutor, getting court preparation, going to the courthouse, things like that. So just because we offer therapy doesn't mean that's the only thing you have to have, and that doesn't mean you have to go to therapy if you need those other services as well.
Merriman House, we offer a lot of educational groups about what is domestic violence, what are the signs and symptoms, red flags, things like that. Are more of our open groups. It's called Survivor Cafe. We have it one in Paducah once a month, and then it rotates to other counties. And so I think in terms of that group work, that educational group is a good way to sort of learn and not have to necessarily identify, if you're not ready to do that. The other groups that we would offer would be what we would call clinical groups, so run by a licensed therapist that would basically teach coping skills, emotional regulation skills, breathing and grounding and all of that good stuff. But those are more closed groups so that the individuals in that group can share freely and know that who's in the group is, who's got the information. We also offer a completely voluntary program, privately funded through our spiritual enrichment program, where we can offer ways for folks to connect with their faith and to study scriptures and prayer and meditation, things like that. The research is very, very clear that faith as a resiliency resource is incredibly important to those for whom it is important. So it's not for everyone, but for those for whom that is important, that is overwhelmingly acknowledged in the scientific research. And it also sort of sends that message, I think, to that survivor of trauma, that trauma impacts the whole person, spirit, soul, body, mind. And so it allows us to open up a space to allow them to look at the impact maybe of that on their faith journey, but then it also brings other folks onto the care team. So maybe it is a member of clergy, or maybe it's somebody that they, have kind of walked their life journey with. So those groups are different because they're not clinical groups, but they're just a way for us to connect more as a resource. But I'm not a group therapist, so I'm going to stop talking because I don't know any more than I just said.
That's wonderful. So this is a kind of fun question, I think, to answer. If you are going to take a mental health day for yourself and do something to take care of yourself, so this is the best stuff, right? Because we're therapists up here talking about this. What do you do for self-care on a mental health day?
Ooh, I'm going fishing. I don't know about y'all. I love to fish. So that's one thing. I lost my daddy 2 years ago. It's one way that really helps me to feel connected to him still. But it's beautiful. Fall's coming. The leaves are changing. It's my favorite time of year. So for me, my kids are going to school, and we've got a little pond that we can go to, or I can go to Noble Park and go fishing, but something outside.
Yes.
But it can be so simple, and I preach self-care. I know I like to talk, but anyway.
This is good. That's why you're here.
Self-care can be anything, guys. I tell you, it doesn't have to be money. Take a hot bath, light some candles, put some music on, take a drive. It could be anything that is going to make you feel like you're filling your cup up. We can't provide for others if we don't take the time to fill our own cups. And so, being really self-aware of how this is a hard field. And so if you're looking to go into it, most people that are therapists, we have our own stuff, right? That's why we're here, and we're passionate about helping people. But secondary trauma is a very real thing. When you work with clients who share these hard stories and these hard events that have happened in their life, we don't just hear it and it goes out. We take that on sometimes. So being very mindful of when it's over, giving ourselves time, just a minute to release it and let it go, so that we don't carry it on with us too. But self-care is essential. I actually put that in my staff's evals. You will take off at least 1 day per quarter for self-care. And I say, self-care is not scheduling doctor appointments all day.
I don't care if you Netflix and chill by yourself. But if that's self-care to you, I want you doing something that is for you.
I would like to jump off of that. Something that, so you were talking about how these fields can be challenging,
Yes.
right, as a provider.
Yes.
And particularly in our clinic, we sometimes are supporting others who are having very intense behaviors at times. And so with my staff, I am constantly reminding them that there is nothing that they should feel guilty about or wrong about taking a tap out, as we call it.
Yes.
And it is in that moment recognizing that I am not the best person to support this individual, and I need to take a tap out so that someone else who can support them beneficially can do so, and they can take that 5 minutes, 10 minutes to step out and regain and feel better about coming back to that situation. That is something we preach very often. Additionally, yes, self-care, taking mental health days. I think that it is only beneficial if you know what's beneficial to your mental health. I have been guilty about saying, oh, I've got laundry to catch up on, I've got the house to get cleaned, blah, 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 and I take a day to do that. That does not fill my cup. It just checks things off my to-do list, right? So there is a difference between checking things off a to-do list and actually filling your cup, actually taking care of yourself. And part of that is just exploring what your options are. And so what Kelly was saying, I think, is perfect about, try a hot bath, try going outside, try some new things. Art sometimes is that, just sitting down and coloring in a coloring book, right? You may just go back to a simple time, but knowing what works for you is really important.
Coloring's so therapeutic. If you haven't tried it lately.
I think sometimes I'm not a good self-care person, so I'm just going to own that in the room for the rest of you that may not be. But I think one of the biggest things I think that is simple is just being aware. Being aware of where you are, how you're feeling, how you're coming across to others. If you're typically not an irritable person and you're irritable, if you're typically a joyful person and you're not, or maybe you're noticing your neck is feeling, tight, or you're taking more breaths than you should. And so I think sometimes just being aware and making the choice that today, whether it's for this 20 minutes or this block or this whole day, I'm just gonna unplug. Doesn't, for me, I'm so bad at this question because people ask me that and I'm thinking, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't really know. I think for me, so for those of you who might be like that kind of personality type, I actually like to be busy and accomplishing and doing, and it's not necessarily because I'm trying to, it's just that's who I am. What I would say for those of you that might be like me, just having permission to unplug from the thing that's pulling my electricity out, if you would. So if it's just unplug for a minute, where I don't have to respond to that email or that text or that thing, and I can just stop and kind of be aware of maybe I just need a minute to tap out or take a breath, or so just monitoring, I think, is a good way to provide yourself self-care. Because I'll tell you this, if you're thirsty, you know it, right? And you're going to do everything you can to go get a drink. Or if you're hungry, you're like, I got to stop right now and get something to eat. Because those drives in us take over and they require something of us. But so many times our mental health is sending those signals, but we don't pay attention to them. So I think for me, it's just trying to be aware, stop and meet that immediate need. If it's a nap, if it's talking to somebody different, if it's stopping this project or this task. So I don't know if that sounds weird, but I'm not a bath, candle, run, I'm not any of that, right? But that doesn't mean those things are bad. It's just they don't fill me up. So if you're like me, maybe that's another way to look at it, to hit the pause button, unplug, whatever that looks like.
I want to open it up to the audience to see if you have questions. This is an unusual opportunity where you have, a whole panel of mental health professionals in front of you. Do you have questions for the panel? It can be a specific panelist that you want to ask a question. It can be for all of us. I can't believe that I thought of every possible question. Yes.
Is it a place where people stay, or is it also outside?
Yes. Yes. It's both. It's all of those things.
Liz, thank you for your question. For the people at home, I want to repeat her question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
She was trying to do that.
So Liz is asking to learn more about the actual services available at the Merriman House.
So the Merriman House Domestic Crisis Center has a residential and a non-residential program. And so the mission of Save, Build, and Change really applies to both. So we have a 24-hour hotline, 24-hour hotline chat, a 36-bed emergency shelter where people that are fleeing domestic violence literally can come and stay and live with us as long as they need to. And then so when they're in that residential side, we're going to take care of all of their needs, food, meals, the things that they need to live with us. So that residential, some stay 24 hours, some stay 48 hours, some have kids that have taken their first steps with us. They stay with us 9 months, a year until they get back on their feet. But once their immediate safety issue is resolved, our housing team is going to start working with them very early on to stabilize their housing. So that team is going to be looking at rental assistance programs, helping them get Section 8 voucher, helping them find a place to live so they can be independent and not in an emergency shelter environment. The non-residential side, we cover the 8 counties, so anybody that lives in those 8 counties can receive services from us no matter when their victimization occurred. And so that's going to, again, be a case manager, housing stabilization team, mental health if that's what they need, spiritual enrichment if that's what they need. There are economic justice services, so helping repair credit, immigration services, to help folks get the asylum that they may be seeking or the proper visas if that's been an aspect of what's been used as a weapon against them. And so those non-residential services, we have an office in Marshall County, the Marshall County Resiliency Center, and then we have an office in Callaway County, and then we have the headquarters there in Paducah, but anybody in those 8 counties can come. In Murray, that office is connected to a transitional housing facility that is a 8-bedroom transitional housing. So those folks don't have an immediate safety risk that they need a 24-hour secured facility, but they're in transition, so they're going to live there. They have individual units, but the common spaces they share, and so they can do that until they get transitioned into a full-time living environment. Legal advocacy, protective orders, assist with those with all of the family courts. We have a survivor attorney that represents our attorneys for some of those hearings. So the services that I just described apply to everyone, and then it's whether you live with us or whether you don't live with us and are getting services on an outpatient basis. There is somebody staffed at our organization 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Anyone else want to expound upon the services your agencies provide?
I think I've said mine.
Everybody else feel like you've covered it. Okay, great. Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Where does the funding come to provide those services?
She's asking.
Well, any of you, but you would just mention the
Yeah, so our funding primarily comes from federal grants, state grants, local grants, private foundations, and private donors. That makes up our funding stream. Primarily, if I were going to say the biggest crux of it is federal and state grants. So, there's a little thing called a government shutdown looming. So always remember when you hear those things, it impacts, anybody that passes through with that fund. So that's where our primary funding comes from.
At Lotus, all of our services are free for our clients. They are also funded by the big chunk of things that Mary just said. So we have federal funding, state funding, and then private donors, other local grants as well that help all of our clients to get those services they need without having that barrier financially.
That's great. We're a nonprofit. We take all insurance. So if you're getting outpatient services, case management you have to have Medicaid for. But for outpatient therapy and the APRN, we take Medicaid, private insurance, and Medicare. Our school-based programs, we see clients regardless of insurance. So primarily the Medicaid clients are the only ones that we bill for. So if you have no insurance or private insurance in the schools, preschool through 12, then we will see you regardless of being able to bill insurance or not.
And then at Bloom, applied behavior analysis is often a therapy that is covered by insurance, most often if the individual has a diagnosis of autism, but not necessarily, they don't have to necessarily be diagnosed. So we accept private insurance and Medicaid. And we often advocate for Medicaid because private insurance will still have that deductible, and that gets pricey really fast.
Did I miss a question over on this side? Yes, Rose. How does one get into Lotus for services?
Yeah, we have some brochures we can pass out later if you need. We have a phone number that you can call. There's a crisis line 24 hours a day as well that you just call, complete an intake form, see if you qualify. We'll get you on a waiting list, get you in if that's what your needs are. Yeah.
How long, what's your wait list like at this time?
Right now, our wait list is probably a little less than 2 months, which is really good.
To fill that gap
Yes.
for a WKCTC student, Mallory can help.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we have advocates that could work with you and do some protocol sessions with you to fill that gap until you get in with a therapist with us.
Yeah. Yes, Tara.
What is your testing procedures like for someone, for a child that's neurodivergent or on?
Yeah, great question. So we don't do diagnostic evaluations. That's something that's done outside or before they typically come to us. When we are doing a new intake for a family, we use evaluation tools to determine what their skill sets are or where their deficits might be. So we use something called PEAK, as well as Essential for Living, and then we also do behavior assessments to determine why those behaviors might be occurring and identifying better alternatives. So we have a couple of different assessment tools that we use, but we, I would say just personally, we avoid things like standardized testing, right, where oftentimes they're compared to typically developing peers and they have to be a certain raw score and T-score. Those things get a little bit complicated because these people that come to us, they're individuals and they have individualized needs, and we really try to focus on that. Yes, of course.
So if a child is an intake and they are like neurodivergent on the spectrum, do you provide services to help cope with those needs met for that, or is there like they have separate trauma? Do you treat that as well?
So we don't do trauma treatment necessarily. However, as I mentioned earlier, we love collaboration with other providers, and we will refer when we see things that are outside of our scope of practice, because ethically that would not be okay for us to try to treat something that we're not skilled in. But we always encourage our families, and we work very closely with our families, I should say that we require our parents to be integral parts of therapy to ensure that they have the same skills or we try to teach our parents the same skills so that they can use those at home when that child is not in our care, because we are outpatient, right? They come to us from 1 to 8 hours a day, depending on the individual, and then they go home. And on the weekends and when they're with their families or when they're with their teachers, we want those people to have resources and tools in their tool belt to help their child out when they're outside of our care. So long answer, but essentially we would probably pull in other resources, but we always want to have open communication with the family about what they feel like their child needs.
And I will say that I think that's a service gap in our area, diagnosis for autism spectrum disorder. I know Aloha Rome at Four Rivers is available, but I am not sure about other services in our area as far as diagnosing autism spectrum. Do any of you know?
We do have a LPA that provides testing in Owensboro, so it's not, it's 2 hours away or 2.5 hours away, but it at least is another resource as long as you have Medicaid for that. But otherwise, we're very limited.
Yes, we are. And
Murray State does have.
I think they don't do that anymore. Do they still do that?
Yes.
Because I
Sean
thought,
Simons, I believe, is.
so he
something.
hasn't backed off on doing that? Okay, good to know.
But I
Okay,
will
good.
say that the delay, right? So you may reach out today, but it may be 6 months to a year before they're able to get
Absolutely.
you in. And so the delay is absolutely there. We've also had families that go all the way to Nashville to Weisskopf, Vanderbilt to get diagnoses, and
Louisville does that too.
that is very challenging for these families.
Washington University, yeah. Yeah, so our families are having to drive 2 or 3 hours to
Yes.
get that diagnosed, and it's even harder if you're an adult and you haven't been diagnosed yet, from what I understand.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay, I think we just hit the 10:30 mark. Anybody have any closing thoughts from our panelists, or we covered everything? We're good. Thank you very much for being here today. As you can see, these women are all compassionate, caring, wonderful assets to our community, and I thank you so much for taking this time out of your day to be here and share with us.
Thank you.